We remove billions of tons of grit and grit every year to do specific for the house production, and the is possessing and growing ecological effect as beaches and inland beds are undressed, alert campaigners. Near the ecological harm, the house production is as well a main donor to hothouse gases. Concrete manufacture one accounts for 7% of world CO2 emissions. In lot countries, grit is frequently recovered unlawfully of beaches or inland beds. But one day grit is undertaken of a inland, the water supply stream can be more rapid and more than forcible, and the water supply spreadsheet near a inland will drop, touching agriculture on the inland banking. Dredging beaches for grit increases coast communities' exploit to tempest harm, since sand beaches act as sponges absorption a tempest's excessive power, thing how is more potential since of environment changing. The planet's deserts may be flooded in grit but the is of no use for building, since soil erosion tool abandon grit harpoon are too round and sleek to be helpful. The top type are the grittier, more than blocky grit harpoon found in riverbeds or beaches. Add in the grit and grit utilized in earth restoration, coast developments and roads, and the present yearly intake rises to 40 trillion tons. The is 2 times the annual sum of sludge transferred by the planet's rivers. In some speech, we're with up grit more rapid rather than environment is creation it. Scientists are now work to bring the sum of raw material utilized in the building production, switch to more than effective manufacture methods, conclusion substitutes for concrete or grit while manufacturing specific, and increase the recirculation of buildings while they're demolished. Down there's a severe question in plasticity waste management. Whatever we can do to address the and discover alternatives to setting plasticity in garbage dump is great, says Dr. Richard Dribble, of Bathtub College's Architectural and Civilian Mechanical Engineering Division. Fibercon says by with 100% processed plasticity, the plasticity reinforced specific gives a 90% reducing in CO2 compared to usual steel cell reinforced specific. Else attitude how could revolutionize the production is the 3D print of houses. We could cut up to 40% of the specific we utilize, and how would include a enormous effect on the grit we are with. Down there's no fine for above design, and so designers and engineering personnel will clearly err on the party of security, says Dr. John Orr of Cambridge College's Mechanical Engineering Division. In instance such building the house are seduced to cut corners. One way of break the could be by 3D print buildings, creation specific shapes immediately of an designer's style. If you include the figure shipped to the car you don't see requirement to above design the house since you get the pattern you style, says Professor Sandra Lucas of Eindhoven College in the Netherlands. Critically, specific shapes of a 3D printing device are personality supporting. The tool they remove the metal or timber mold in that specific is historically filled, besides save on raw material. If you style in the capacity to get parts separately, to be a directory of purlin and so hereinafter, you enable for more than use, says Dr. John Orr of Cambridge College's Mechanical Engineering Division. This flat blocks, the dull offices how we requirement for our everyday lives, these we requirement to changing how we construct and disassemble since we're an economics constructed on grit and specific. Yet time design for deconstructivism sounds reasonable, questions stay. It may do building more than costly, and while a house is due for drift following 40 year or so, such who constructed it will perhaps include retired so such take it downward may not aware precisely how to disassemble it. The ecological questions include be more than immediate as world concrete manufacture has soared, by 300% with 1990, substantially due to growth in China that accounts for on 3/4 of the, in and concomitant growth in CO2 emissions. Companies and scientists are now invent ways to seize CO2 in specific, to absorb up more than of the CO2 liberated while concrete is made. Canada company CarbonCure has advanced a way of closing in more than carbon sequestration by injection condensed CO2 in wet specific. Not just is the specific much stronger, the company says it could rescue up to 700 millionth tons of CO2 emissions a year. So distant, 100 producers include adoptee the technique. We wish to enhance the environmental track of specific, and to enhance the processed properties of specific following drift, says Dr. Asha Jerbai. No of the solutions creature treated on wool, by themselves, resolve 21SAINT age community's appetite suppressant for overwhelming raw material in extensive amounts. Yet, says ecologist Kiran Pereira, this building segment as a entire is the greatest solitary customer of asset, so any type of changing we can do is potential to include a enormous effect.